The high mountains are my happy place. Whether I'm running or hiking at altitude in the mountain, it's so rewarding, it's so beautiful. But how do you prepare to run a race like Leadville, Ure 100, UTMB, high in the mountain when you live at sea level? Today, I'm going to discuss how I prepare myself to race at high altitude despite living at sea level. Tips that have helped me live epic adventure high in the mountain. Hi, Simon here. Welcome to my channel. I'm an ultra runner racing 100-mile ultramarathon on average every month for the past 4 years and on my way to racing 100 mile. On this channel, you'll find a lot of tips video, and today I want to share my experience racing high in the mountain, especially at altitude, despite living right next to the ocean. How can you prepare for the thinner air? How can you prepare for these crazy climbs when all you have access to are flat land and treadmill? Because let's be honest, the mountain are my happy place, but I cannot always be there. I can be there in vacation, I can be there when I'm racing, but most of the time I do have to work, and unfortunately, well, it's at sea level. If you've seen my recent video on the toughest ultramarathon in the world, you know that I've raced some pretty gnarly race out there, and I have strong credential racing up to 14,000 feet, despite living at sea level. And it's not just ultramarathon, but I've also climbed, I think, 45 or almost 50 of the 14ers in Colorado. So I want to share with you what has worked well for me, which is not just acclimatation. There's other things that you can do that can be very helpful, which I'll cover later in the video. Also how to prepare mentally for these races, which is a little different than a normal race. And finally and importantly, I want to share with you common mistake and misconception about racing in the mountain and things that I think are not working well, things that are either a waste of money, a waste of time, or are just not very effective. First is, do you actually need to do anything special? Is your race or your hike high enough that it warrants any special preparation? And just breaking down how it feels going directly from sea level where I live. But keep in mind that this is subjective and it depends on different people. My wife Nora, for example, she's very good at acclimating very quickly, whereas I'm behind hissing and puffing and struggling and having a terrible headache. But then there are things that I can do and then I quickly adapt to it, and then we're both together mountain goating around in the mountain and having a blast climbing 14ers. First 6,000 feet, feel totally fine, not impacted at all. Climb to 8,000 feet, I start feeling it a little bit. I start feeling a little bit off, and maybe I won't be able to climb running uphill as well, but relatively okay. It's when we reach 10,000 feet for a significant amount of time that, wow, it's really kicking my butt. That's where I start having trouble with digestion, definitely going uphill very quickly. I'm out of breath, and I just feel off a little bit more tired, a little bit more sluggish, a little bit out of shape. Going up to 12,000 feet, I'm not just feeling not okay. I'm feeling bad. I'm very much out of breath immediately as soon as it goes uphill. I'm hissing and puffing and struggling. But the real nightmare is when you go all the way to 14,000. That's where I have dizziness. I can have headache. I feel like total crap. It's just totally out of breath, needing to take breaks all the time. And so for me, when I think it warrants kind of doing something special for altitude is when I go above 10,000 feet for a significant amount of time. And so what do you need to do to prepare for altitude? And unfortunately, the thing that works the best by far is exposure. It's going out there. You don't need to live there all year round, but being there ahead of the race will help a lot. It makes a huge difference. It's simple, but at the same time, logistically, it's not always super feasible. And so very frequently, unfortunately, you need to do the most that you can with as little time as possible. And ideally, we're talking about 10 to 14 days. The more, the better. So if you could do 21 days, that's even better. But at some point, there's kind of a diminishing return where, quite frankly, between 14 days for me and 21 days, I'm already pretty much acclimated. I'm totally fine. If we go down to 7 days, that's a little bit more on the short end where it's still worth going 7 days ahead of time. I feel a difference. I'm a little bit stronger, but altitude is still affecting me very significantly. Something that you need to be careful is to not go too short. And we say, and it's anecdotal, but 2 or 3 days before the race is probably the worst thing that you can do. It would be better to just arrive less than 24 hours before the race, and then you go directly, or to be there for a week where you're starting to see changes in your body. And so if you're fortunate enough and you're able to get there ahead of time, let's talk about ideal scenario. Yes, it's 14 days, and ideally you will go there gradually. It's the wrong thing to do would be you fly directly and you climb a 14er. Now, I'm definitely guilty of that because what I do for acclimatation is trying to take my vacation, going out with Nora, and we want to do as much as possible, and that's where I'm hissing and puffing and struggling. But we're talking about ideal situation, and you'll go gradual, so you can stay at the base camp where it's more like 6,000 feet, then 8,000 and 10,000. And if we think about Colorado, that would be, for example, going in the Front Range, being in Boulder or a place like that for a couple of days, and then you can move to Leadville, for example, which is 10,000 feet. During these first few days, you go out there, you do some jogging, lower intensity, and the higher you go, the more you want to also just spend time on your feet. Go climb mountain, have hike. These are wonderful adventure. It's so much fun to acclimate because you're out there in the mountain, just getting your body ready. So hiking, power hiking is definitely something that is very helpful. The other things that you need to be doing during that period of time that your body is adapting to altitude is drinking plenty of fluid and being careful about diuretic. Ideally, don't drink too much coffee, don't drink alcohol, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Eat well, your body is producing a lot of red blood cell, so make sure that you have the energy to produce that, and you might feel very tired. You might be sleepy in the afternoon, you might fall asleep very early. Rest, your body is exerting a lot of energy adapting. Provide the tool for your body to do that, especially the first few days. If you're tired, that's a good sign. That means that you're adapting to altitude. Let's talk about what else can you do other than going up at altitude. So the first one is actually to mentally prepare for it. And sure, more broadly, that means mental toughness in general in ultramarathon. Of course, that's helpful. But beyond that, I think you need to first recognize the challenge up ahead and be prepared for the fact that you will struggle more than you would normally. You will feel like you're totally out of shape, that all of your training has been useless because now you're trying to climb something that is not even steep and you're out of breath and you feel so out of energy. If you know it's coming, for me at least, it's very much helpful. And in fact, it's good to know that yes, on the uphill and when you're up there at 12,000, 14,000, you're going to feel like crap. You're going to feel really bad. But as soon as you start going downhill and as soon as you're at lower altitude, you'll feel much, much better. That it's not that I'm out of shape. It's because I'm at altitude. That's it. Don't panic. Take it slow. Go slower. Totally fine. If it prevents you from being in the red and in deficit, that will be beneficial long-term during that race. The other thing that is super important is do more strength training than usual because you will be sluggish all the time. And if at least your legs are strong enough to keep pushing, that's going to make a big difference. If your legs are able to support the fact that you're running those downhill as opposed to taking it slow, you'll make up time and that will be very important. Also, it might be stupid to say, but boosting your sea level fitness will benefit your high altitude fitness. They are directly related. It really feels like you have this level of fitness and then you kind of take a hit when you're at altitude. So if you're able to be a little more fit, then after taking the hit or the penalty for the altitude, you'll be performing better. And so because of that, I think it's super beneficial to work on increasing your VO2 max, doing things like threshold run, interval, those high intensity workout. Make sure that you have 20% of your mileage every week that is high intensity. Finally, I touched it a little bit. When it comes to race strategy, don't do what you usually do because you will get more tired at altitude. And unless you've actually raced at altitude, I would lean on the side of being a little more conservative. Another aspect that is pretty important and good to mention is that digestion will be much harder at altitude. Personally, I'm pretty good at fueling during these races, but when I'm at altitude, I very much struggle. Every time I've puked in a race was at altitude. There's a direct correlation between being high at altitude and me having stomach problem. And that means that I need to change my game plan a little bit. I need to run a little slower so that I can eat more. Otherwise, I'm gonna bunk later during the night. And finally, learn how to calm yourself, to bring your heart rate down. Because when you're up there, it's very likely that your heart rate will be higher than usual. You notice that your heart rate is through the roof, slow down a little bit, take a deep breath, take your time, and focus on just getting back to a normal zone, because you cannot have your heart rate in the 180 for 30 hours. Your heart is gonna explode. Getting there ahead of time is definitely a luxury that you cannot always afford. Is it possible to race a race like Leadville without doing that? Yeah, it's possible, but know that you'll be at a huge disadvantage. So what else can you do? And let's talk about the things that actually are working. If we go at the high end, you would have things like normobaric hypoxic chamber, but that's more if you're a pro athlete and you have access to a training center. Another thing that you might have access to if you're a pro athlete would be things like EPO. And I'm sure EPO is working. Obviously, that's doping. Obviously, that's cheating. Then you have things like TENS that would be hypoxic. I haven't used that myself, so I cannot really comment, and I don't know anyone who's done that. And I've definitely heard mixed reviews. Then sometimes people ask, what about medications? The one that might be worth considering is iron supplements, especially if you've been anemic in the past from lack of iron, or you know that you're on the lower end in terms of iron levels. You're going to be producing a lot of red blood cell. You require iron for that. So make sure that you have enough, but that could be through food. It's just, it wouldn't hurt to have supplements, especially if you know that that's something that you've struggled with in the past. Then other medication would be things like Diamox, but this is more to avoid altitude sickness. It won't help you in terms of performance. It could even make it worse. So it's more something that you would use if you're climbing like Everest or something really, really high like that. But the purpose is a little different. Now let's move to things that I would not recommend or are not working very well. And the thing is that it's such a common problem to want to be up at altitude but being stuck at sea level during training season that, of course, people will propose a lot of different methods, and some of them are very well supported by evidence, some of them are not very well supported. The first one that you hear very frequently is heat training. Now, I'm not saying don't heat train, but personally, having done it myself, I have not seen any difference whatsoever. And just to put things in perspective, I did Badwater 135, so temperature up to 120 Fahrenheit, which is super hot. That's one of the hottest places in the world. And 2 weeks later, I was doing Ouray. And when we made the transition to go to Colorado, I was struggling so much with altitude. It was terrible. Luckily, I had enough time to acclimate for Ouray, the race itself. But the first few days, absolutely terrible. The heat training did not help. What you do hear, though, is that some people claim that, well, it's because it's dry heat. It should be humid heat that you prepare for. But even that I have tried myself, and I know quite a lot of people in places like Georgia and Florida. In the summer, it's very hot, very humid. And when they go race a race like Leadville, they struggled a lot. But of all of the things, that's the one that I've heard the most frequently. And maybe I'm just not responding well to that, and people I know are not responding well to that. But some people have seen advantage. So same thing, let us know in the comment below if that has helped you or not to heat train before going to altitude. Another one that you hear frequently are training with these masks that will restrict breathing. And that is not something I would recommend. It will constrict your breathing, but it will not mimic hypoxic condition. So most people say that this is more gimmicky, this is not necessarily helpful. There might be benefit to it other than acclimating for altitude itself. It might help you with your breathing and things like that, but it will not compensate for the fact that you're going to lack in oxygen up at high altitudes. In Colorado, they also sell a lot of these bottles of air that you can breathe if you're struggling a little bit. Obviously, it's not practical if you're going to be racing to be carrying that. But even conceptually, I'm a little bit skeptical that you have enough in these bottles to really make a significant difference. I understand the concept, but short of having medical supply oxygen with the big bottle and then the nose thing, it feels just taking one puff probably doesn't change so much. But regardless, it's not helping you adapt for the race, and therefore this is not something I would recommend, and I would consider that to be just a waste of money. The last one is to stay hard and toughen up and just, it's all in your head. It's definitely not all in your head, and there's some mental training that you can do ahead of time to prepare for these things, but don't ignore the fact that altitude sickness is very real. It's a real butt kicker to race at altitude, and if you don't take it seriously, if you're just dismissing it, trust me, you're gonna struggle. Let's talk about the most common mistake for people going directly at altitude from sea level. The first one is to not recognize how much of a challenge it is, to just kind of discard it as being one of the factors for the race. In my video about the toughest ultramarathon, quite a lot of them were at altitude, and then it's 33,000 feet of gain. high at altitude, and it's unclear which one is the worst. Well, I'm telling you, the fact that it's at altitude is a huge factor in that. That's why races like Leadville, that are not necessarily on paper so difficult, are actually not that easy either. On paper, it won't look so bad, but trust me, you will feel it. It's also good to know that being high in the mountain is not just about thin air, like that's basically all I talked about, right? But it's also understanding mountains. The weather can change like this, especially in Colorado, middle of the afternoon, big thunderstorm. These can come in very quickly. And when you're in a bad pass where it's technical and within 30 minutes you have a thunderstorm, know what you're doing, know what you're getting yourself into, and take seriously things like recommended gear or mandatory gear. Have those gears. Things like a safety blanket. It's easy to think, well, I don't need a safety blanket. It's very light and it could save you. Take it seriously. Another one is to not go gradual when you're acclimating. And I'm most definitely guilty of that. I know it's wrong, but look, if I'm in Colorado in the San Juan Mountain, I'm not just gonna hang out in town. I'm gonna look at the biggest mountain and say, we're going there today. And then I'll have a terrible headache. I'll feel like crap. And then we're doing it again. That is not the way to adapt well to altitude. You will eventually get there, but it's gonna be slower. It would be much better to be smart about it. But hey, we have so few vacation days that I try to make the most out of it. Dehydration is pretty common too. You're used to drinking a certain amount of water, but high in the mountain you need more. Another common mistake is to fall for these gimmicks. Look, we want to do everything we can to acclimate to altitude. And Simon, you're telling me that the only way to do it is to be there. That's a little bit unsatisfying, right? I totally understand that. You want to do as many things as you can to get prepared. So you're doing heat training, you get the mask, you do everything. The reality is not all of these things are working. And then you might shrug and say, well, I mean, what's the harm in trying? Well, obviously you can lose some money, but also if you're spending time doing these things, this time might be better invest making sure that you have enough strength training every week, 2 or 3 sessions of 30 minutes. Make sure that you have enough energy to do these high intensity workouts. These things sound little, but that's where you should invest your time. And that's it, folks. Racing high in the mountain is so much fun. It's so much rewarding. It's my happy place, and I would love for you to have these adventures. Take the altitude seriously if possible. Be there ahead of time. Gradually increase the altitude and do the little things. Make sure that you drink enough. Make sure that you eat enough. Make sure that you're sleeping enough when you're there. Before getting there, increase your fitness. Make sure that you have strong leg so that at least the impact won't be as bad. But what do you think? What has helped you acclimate or prepare for high mountain racing up at altitude? Please let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.